I had about 6,000 clients, right? It was saying goodbye to 6,000 people that I've known over 18 years.
Justin, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming, sir.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So we come from the same part of the world, right? We both moved from Northern California at the exact same month. Get that microphone a little closer, baby. There we go. People want to hear from you.
They want to hear.
They want to hear from you.
There we go.
What brought you up here?
I think like a lot of other people get out of California. That was a different time. Biggest thing for us is our kids. Right. Just because of the school systems there weren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And when they're coming home every single day and they're worried about fighting and the schools being shut down and, police, helicopters hovering over the school and stuff, it's like, all right, we need to start looking for stuff. And so we really looked from like this area all the way to like Bentonville, Arkansas. So we were, the 5 big cities for us was Boise, was St. George, Utah, was Scottsdale, Austin, Texas, and then Bentonville. And so for me, I'm like, all right, if I'm going to shut my practice down, then I can go to all these different areas, and I have friends that have practices in these spots, except for this town. So, and then because we've got a dual family, so with my kids still in the Bay Area, and then we've got my wife's kids 100% of the time. It was, all right, what is the distance now? So the further east we go, then the longer it's going to take for kids to go back and forth, or for us to come back and forth, as well.
Right.
So
yeah, that was one of the big reasons why Texas kind of got dropped off the table for us, because we very similar considerations. We were thinking initially, it was like, well, what about Salt Lake? I went out. Yeah. I have a dear friend who moved out there pre-COVID, so I was like going out there to see him anyway, once a year. And I was like, this is not the place for us. It's not bad. I was just, it's just a different. I was like, it's too much. It to me, it was just so overpopulated already. Yeah. Right. Like there was just sprawl everywhere. Like he's halfway up the mountain. And it's like, anyway. And, his neighbor, by the way, runs a garage sale every week. So she buys clothing on pallets, and she just buys pallets of stuff and then sorts them and then has an open garage sale every single weekend. And so I'm like, what are all these cars? And like, oh, it's sketchy. And he's telling me, he's like, I don't let the kids go outside. I'm like, wait, who's coming by? He's like, that's the point. It's the regulars for the garage sales. Those are the people that come by, and my kids ain't playing out in front with like the crazies, which nothing against garage sales. But anyway, so I was like, Salt Lake's not the thing, but Texas is really far. Yeah. And it might seem silly to say, hey, it's really, really far, but my wife's family and my family, in fact, are still in California. And my wife said, look, we're going to move. Great. But I don't want to be so far that it prevents our kids from knowing their cousins and their family and stuff. And I was like, that's totally fair. Yeah. So, and plus I knew people that moved here, and, I only know one guy who lives in Texas, and he works for like Chevron, and I wasn't getting a job for Chevron.
I can't, I don't know if I can handle the humidity out there.
I don't mind the heat.
No,
I don't mind the heat. Hot, sticky.
Yeah. Heat, but humidity, like here I love, because it's just that dry heat, So, I mean, Bay Area, a little bit more humid, but it's not like it is in Texas or further east. Yeah,
the humidity in the Bay Area is interesting in the winter, too. I didn't realize, I had a neighbor who had ironically been hunting in Idaho before. He said, when it's 30 degrees in Idaho, you don't freak out. No. Like, it's totally fine. I said, what do you mean? He was like, look, it's 57 degrees right now. You got like 2 sweaters on. And he's like, it's because the air is moist. Yes. Like, you're speaking crazy. Right. Now it's like 30 degrees, I'm in a t-shirt. It's no problem.
Right. Yeah. We noticed the same thing.
Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah. So you had to make a big sacrifice in coming up here. You had a high-end, super successful practice, right? You were working with professional athletes in multiple different sports. That's a really tough sell to be like, hey, why don't we move?
Yeah, it was a hard thing to do for sure. I mean, I've been treating athletes for 18 years. When I got into it, it was my first athletes were UFC fighters. And so dealing with these guys and doing, like you do jiu-jitsu, right?
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.
Right. Having to understand what jiu-jitsu is, and just the art of, what they're doing, getting punched in the face, And then it stemmed to NHL and not NBA, but NFL, and then Major League Soccer. And so it just started to blossom, from there. And then there's a ton of athletes that come in and train, in the Bay Area anyways.
Yeah, you're right.
So that was a perk, that I've been able to have over the years. So for me, that wasn't really wasn't a hard thing to be like, all right, I need to cut that, because that wasn't a big part of what my practice is. Even my practice is very active, right? So the hard part with that was, I had about 6,000 clients, right? It was saying goodbye to 6,000 people that I've known over 18 years. That was the hard part, saying, all right, do I sell my practice or do I just shut my doors, right? And I tried to sell it. The hard part is because I've built such a niche practice, and how I do things, as a chiropractor, a lot of people just think, oh, you just come on in, lay on the table, you're there for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, right? We make some noises to come out of your back and then out you go,
yeah, right.
So my approach is, a little bit different. It's 60 minutes long. We're doing a lot of corrective behaviors, a lot of movement assessment, exercise, whatever it might be, that's sort of going to get your body to move better. So because I had built that niche, and I'd had 4 offices and other employees that worked for me, as well, which they were all building, but none of them really wanted to own their own business, right? So trying to sell the practice to them, they just didn't want to do it. And so that was the hard part, then trying to find someone to come in and take over what I've already built over, at that point, been 15 years. So I didn't feel right selling to someone to have those 6,000 people expect that it was me, and vice versa, that person to expect all of those people, were going to come back to them because they bought the practice. So I just, I divvied it up, and just, if people ask, I'm like, go see, Dino, go see Armin, go see, Dr. Ho, go see these people here, because they're the ones that are very close to sort of what I do. And I just closed up shop.
That's rough.
Yeah.
When I was closing up my SAT practice down in California before we moved, I remember clearing out my classroom, and I had walls of merch.
Yeah.
It was like the sweaters and the hoodies, and people had brought me these gifts. Like this one girl, she had gotten me, she liked the class so much, she got me these custom M&Ms with my goat logo on them.
Right.
And if you know, on the other side.
Yeah.
And so I'm clearing out my office, and I find these M&Ms. It's just like, it was so overwhelming. It's like, dude, everything I built, this is everything I've ever done. And there was such a loving community. That was really tough for me to walk away from. So I imagine it had to be even worse for you.
It's tough because you've built for years and years and years, right? You have built that rapport with those people, whether it was the high-end athlete. I mean, right. I got to, 2016, I got to travel the world with a fencer, which was amazing. And the country of Panama paid for me to go travel with her to make sure that we got her to the 2016 Olympics, as a fencer, so that was fun. I mean, I wasn't traveling the entire year, but it was, all right, you want to go to Korea? Let's go. We're out there for 2 weeks. Do you want to go to Boston? You want to go to New York? Do you want to go to Costa Rica? Right. So as you're going to these different places, it was fun, because now you're traveling with her, and your goal is to get her there and make sure that she is healthy enough to make it to the Olympics, and which she did. So it's those things that were tough, and so when I moved here, I was never like asking any of my, athletes, hey, can you give me a signature? Can you do this? Can you do that for me? And it was like, I just reached out to a ton of them and just said, hey, as you guys know, I've moved, and because I've moved, can you, or are you willing to send a picture, send me something? Right. And then we had left, we'd gone on vacation. I'd let my next door neighbor know, who is from Fresno. Right. And so they said, or I told them, hey, we might be getting some stuff in the mail, and a couple of days later, he sends me a picture of a stack of stuff. And he goes, what in the hell are you ordering? And I'm like, I didn't order anything, so we get back, and it was jerseys and pictures and gloves and, all that type of stuff that, all these athletes over the years that I've just treated just sent me stuff, so that's now sort of what I have, on my walls inside the office, is it's marketing, but it's like, that's, the thanks that I got, from these people that, I was able to treat for, years and years and years, and keep them going.
Yeah. I still have the M&Ms. I haven't crushed
them up. Yeah.
It was hard though. I mean, it's interesting because I stepped away completely from the field I was in.
Yeah.
Just because predominantly I didn't know if the SAT was going to get fired back up again, or if it was going to stay, optional. And if it stays optional or even not used, it's like, well, I'm not going to spend like another couple of years to build a practice again and then have nothing happen with it.
Right.
But you were able to rebuild your chiropractic practice here very successfally so far. Yeah.
Rebuilding. Yes.
Rebuilding.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, you come to a city that no one knows who you are, and friends of mine, they run a podcast called, Mind Pump. And so it's a big fitness podcast. And so as I started coming out here, people knew me from that, which again, I had no idea. So I was able to go out to different gyms and like, oh, we listen to Mind Pump. We know who you are. Can you teach a mobility class? Can you teach a mobility class? Can you do this? And so that sort of started getting me out, into the community here, which made things a lot easier. But even still, it's an ongoing, daily thing. And when, people do come in, they realize that, oh, you are different because, you have a full gym in your office, and there's not many chiropractors that you're going to walk into their office and be like, yeah, you have a full gym,
So, okay. Again, I was a rower in college.
Yeah.
One of the problems that we ran into is we would do the exact same asymmetrical movement like 4,000 times a day.
Oh, yeah.
That was it. Like for me, I would swing out to the right, compress completely, like arm straight, right shoulder drop. Like, so my body is just completely twisted.
Yeah.
And like my hips are off kilter and my collarbones aren't lined up. So for you, part of your practice is actually retraining movement. And is that what you use the gym equipment for?
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, the gym equipment itself can be used for a lot of different things. So if you're a CrossFitter,
sure,
right, that your job is to lift weights, right? And you can't lift weights because of shoulder problem, right? We want to go in and figure out where that shoulder problem comes from. So I can have you go load a bar if you need to, or I can take you through some simple movements just to see how's your shoulder moving in space. Because if it doesn't move, then I know it doesn't move with load, right? And so that's my biggest thing is, how does the body move with no weight around it? And can you move, in a natural way? Jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, you guys don't move, even though you think you move, and so that's one thing right there is
What do you mean I don't move? What the hell are you saying? Are you saying I'm stiff?
Right.
Right, that's it.
You can call it whatever you want. So
I've been having a neck problem. I was
So I mean, going in there and using the gym equipment it's there as an adjunct, but my first thing is I always try and express to people, you can't move what you can't move. Right. But we want to go in and we want to try and force movement somewhere. And then we wonder why we're in pain and we scratch our heads going, but I didn't do anything wrong. No, you didn't. You just built intolerance over time. Right. And that intolerance over that time, is just like you just keep scratching at yourself. And at some point it's going to get irritated and, hot, red and swollen. So you just reached the end of your adaptation process and your body said, yeah, we're done. Sorry. We're going to send out the pain signal. You need to stop. And some people listen to it and others don't.
Well, if you're a CrossFitter, you definitely don't.
You don't. If you're a runner, you don't.
Right.
Rowers, a lot of them, they didn't either, so yeah.
Yeah, rowing's pretty bad. I trained with this guy named Skies from Hawaii. He's got to be like 240 if he's a pound.
Yeah.
Like he's just a tank, right? And he spent the last 8 years training no-gi jiu-jitsu like in the jungle somewhere in Hawaii. Literally, like I think they just roll out mats and they just get after. So he's training with a lot of fighters and stuff. And Hawaii has a great history of producing fantastic fighters. Yeah. And so he comes in and trains at Alliance where I train, and I'm like 190 and I'm like, and he compressed me. It was yesterday morning. I literally had my knee smashed into my face, like my right knee's into my face, my left leg's way out there. He's laying on top of me. I almost had an armbar though. Like that was the thing. It's
almost.
Like if my back doesn't blow out, I'm gonna tap you so hard. Like this is gonna be great. And I wiggled out of it. But the point is, like it's such unusual movement and unusual forces going, especially into jiu-jitsu. I can attest. You're dealing with small muscle groups and problems that you would never ever deal with in a standard sporting environment.
Because they're all micro movements,
right?
Is what you're doing. I mean, the gross movement itself, but I mean, you think about the movement that you just did for an armbar, or if you were in the armbar, right? You're bringing that joint to its end range, and you're blowing through the capsule, right? So, which is where you don't want to be,
Good.
But this is also where I train a lot of my fighters, right, to that position and be like, I want to make your elbow more resilient, so it may buy you another second or two, right? Because that second or two is vital to you. Right. So if you can say, hey, I can still build strength at that end range position, which again, we as humans rarely ever train at end range positions, right? We always train you look at a bell-shaped curve, right? We were sitting in the middle of that bell-shaped curve, but where do we always hurt ourselves? On the ends of the bell-shaped curve, right? So let's take our training to the ends, right? And then let's work back to the middle.
Are there really things you can do to get greater mobility within a specific joint, like a hinge joint, like your elbow? You can actually make it like go a little bit more.
You don't want it to go further.
I definitely don't want
it to be stronger.
Oh,
right. So if I can make that connective tissue stronger, right, due to load capacity, right? You go to the gym and you want to start to squat. You don't start at 500 pounds.
Sure.
Right. You start at air squats. Can I do it correctly first? And then I add a bar. Then I start to add weight. And over time, you may get to 500 pounds, right? No different at your elbow, right? We're always training strength here, right? To hold, whether it's, if you have a gi, right? This is where you want to be, right? No gi, it's too hard, to try and grab something on that end. But if someone gets you, how can I make my tissue at this extended position stronger? Again, at that point, you're buying a second or two. After that, they're probably broke through that that resisted level, and you're tapping anyways.
Yeah,
hopefully.
You must be dealing with, at that level, you got to be dealing with like prize fighters, because for everyone else, they're like, okay, what do I do if my arm's extended? It's like tap 3 seconds ago. Yeah, right. I mean, like, don't get in that position. That's the number. Like, how do you get out of an arm bar? Don't get arm barred.
Right.
Like, what are you doing?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's Thursday morning, and we're like in our 40s. What are you doing?
Right. Yeah. The fighters were a different breed just because that's their job, right? Their job was to go fight, and it was always very interesting because whenever they got hurt, majority of the time it was hurt from a belt lesser than them, namely like a white belt. They were in there showing something, right? And this white belt, gets in their head, oh my gosh, I'm rolling with Josh Thompson right now, who's a black belt, and I'm going to come in here, I'm going to do whatever, and I'm going to tweak his ankle now. It's like, well, you just took him out of his potential fight that he had in, whatever that time is, and you're a white belt that's not doing anything. So what was that for? Well, it's so you could put a, check on the board.
No, it's because he's a white belt and he's an idiot.
Right.
It's not even like, I guarantee you, he just did something that was so weird and like unpredictable. It's like the white belts are always baby rattlesnakes, man.
Yeah.
Because they don't even. I never attribute malice to white belt injuries because they're too dumb to know what's mean. True. It's like, I could be really mean, but I know how to be. You're just being spastic and dumb. And like, I think it's better to call them dumb than malicious. I think this is actually a compliment to them. Yeah. Like, I'm doing you a solid, white belts.
That's it.
Yeah. So moving up here, have you found another stable of, like professional athletes, or are people reaching out to you, or is there not that really market here?
There is a market. Yeah, for sure. I've got a few, in right now. I mean, right now it's just trying to just build word of mouth and getting people out there. And actually, a friend of mine from the Bay Area who now lives here, he is like one fight away from potentially making it to the UFC. His dad was in the UFC, in the past, and so he trains up here at SBG.
Wait, how old is this guy?
Anthony's got to be 23, 24, 25.
And his dad was in like the original UFC.
Not original. I mean, he's Anthony Senior's got to be late 40s. Is where he's at.
Oh,
so
man, good for him.
Yeah, he was a
That's
Mighty Mike.
Wild.
He owns actually a fairly big. It's called Ant Dog's Gym down in Gilroy, and they do a lot of like kid stuff, and then a lot of their fighters are the pre-level before they go and train at like AKA, which is American Kickboxing Academy there in the Bay Area. So,
that's super cool. Yeah. I had there was this guy I trained with a lot from Gilroy named Manny Diaz, and Manny Diaz was a tank. Yeah. Like this guy I can't remember, it was either like a bull tattoo on his chest or something, but his chest was like gigantic. Yeah. And he was so willful. This is a real cautionary tale, I think. And Manny was incredibly talented. Like he won the world championships as a purple belt, which is really hard. Yeah. I mean, winning at any level is really hard, but like in the purple and the brown in particular, those are tricky. And then of course you have black belt, and those are the best people ever. But as you're coming up, the purple and browns get really competitive. And so he won that year, and then he went through brown. We were both brown belt at the same time. And then we both got our black belts within, I think, like a month of each other. And in one of his first black belt tournaments, he was a pretty well-known guy and just went into the absolute. A guy got a really skilled black belt who's been a black belt for a long time, got an armbar on him, and he didn't tap. He was like refusing, super willful, incredibly strong. He's like, ah! And his arm popped like 4 times. And the guy he was fighting against just let it go and was like, hey, you either tap right now or like I'm forfeiting. I'm not training. Yeah, right. Like, and it was in a real competition. He's like, all right. And that was it. That was the end of his career. Yeah. It was like, there's this balance that I think at the pro level, you don't really have a choice, right? Because you have to go to the end because you have to get that advantage. But then at the semi-pro or even amateur level, people emulate what they see the real tough guys doing. It's like, you don't understand. He may never fight again. Right. If you want to come back next week after this tournament and come back and enjoy jiu-jitsu again, you should not let your arm get ripped in half. You know, it's a really weird thing dealing with that semi-pro pro borderline, because people just do anything to get the advantage.
And there's not a lot of money in it either, but yet people are loving it.
Right. You know, that's why I said semi-pro.
Yeah. I mean, you want to go in and, I can remember a lot of my guys that were right at the beginning, of the UFC stuff. And, they're, 2 and 2s and 3 and 3s, meaning 2,000 to show up, 2,000 to win. You don't win, you just made 2,000. And then your fight camp was 12 weeks. So you just made $2,000 for a 12-week fight camp or an 8-week fight camp, whatever the heck it was for you. And then you have to pay off your coaches and stuff as well. So you just made $150. Right. To lose.
Right. One of the guys I used to train with, Marty Amadeus, down in California. He's great. Marty's this retired law enforcement guy, and he was one of the OG MMA guys. So he fought Jake Shields when Jake was 21, and Sean Shirk and Rich Franklin. And Marty just liked fighting, right? He was a wrestler at Cal Poly and then learned jiu-jitsu, could box, was an absolute monster. Yeah. And he's like, he's got this real nasally voice. He's like, it was great. Then they were paying me $300 to fight. And I was like, I made $300. I didn't even, and he's beating the hell out of people and people beating the hell out of him. He was really world class. But I think it really goes to the point that fighters aren't fighting for the money.
No.
Just like most teachers aren't teaching for the money. Yeah. They deeply love and relate to what they do. Yeah. And I think that's so hard for most people to understand. Yeah. These people are getting abused or it's this problem. It's no, you don't understand. They do it for free. Right. You have those. Yeah. You have the backyard brawls and people are just fighting for free. Right. Yeah. It's wild stuff, man.
That's been fun. It's been a good ride. Yeah. And so just now trying to build it up here.
So speaking of building up. Yeah. Water polo. Yeah. You played polo in college, D1. Yeah. I played polo all through high school, and then I was a rower in college. The water sports in this area are not as developed as they were in northern and southern California. No just absolutely not. So talk to me about how you got connected with the water polo community here, the budding water polo community.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we live in Eagle, right? And I happen to be on the Facebook page, and Joanne had posted on there. We know Joanne now because she's from Morgan Hill, where I was from, right? And so she had posted, hey, does anyone know where my 9-year-old could play, water polo? And I'm like, hey, such a random question, for Idaho. And so I just look at her name, and we've got 15 of the same friends. Like, how in the heck do we have, you live up here, we're here now, right? And so I asked, Kara, my wife, and I'm like, hey, do you know Joanne Sarich? And she's like, yeah, I went to high school with her. I'm like, she lives somewhere here in Eagle, And so at that point, then she and I sort of, were sort of DMing back and forth. And she said, well, there's a master's team here. I said, well, I do know they have a high school team here. I said, I don't know to what depth. And she goes, well, our oldest is only 9 years old. And, Jackson is now, he's 11, but he played on our JV team this past year. And in the finals tournament scored 8 goals in 3 games, as an 11-year-old. So it's
wait, the JV team for the high school?
Yeah, for the high school. So we asked the coaches, hey, do you care if this guy, because he now practices with the older guys. And we asked him, and they're like, yeah, we don't care. And he came out there and scored 3 goals in his first game, 2 in his second and 3 in 3 in his last game. So I'm 11 years old coming out here and kicking some butt. So to answer your question, I then went to the pool. It's up at the Y, met Mark, he's like, yes, we have a high school program. If you'd love to coach, help, then we'd love to do it. And that was my first year moving out here. I was sort of in a semi-retired, state, and
do I really want to commit to anything?
It's trying to figure out where I want to do and how I'm going to work and where I'm going to work and, that type of stuff. But yeah, so helped coach, that next year. And then we had a master's team. We have one, and we're just now seeing more and more people that are coming out of the woods that are I used to play in college. And so we've probably got 10 plus people between men and women that all played some degree of college, whether it was JUCO, D1, D2, we have quite a few that, played in high school, but they still have skill. They know how to play the game,
they still got it.
They know what they're doing, and so it's fun, and we've played in 2 tournaments now and taken second place in both of them, and one just recently with Boise State. So that was playing against all these college kids, and we lost to Chico State 9-8, but a bunch of old men out there playing against all these college kids, and we're taking it to them. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful for this. So I didn't, I remember the first time I saw lacrosse, I was a junior in high school, and we went on a small town trip for my honors AP English class. We went to Mendocino.
Yeah.
We're like up north.
Yep,
and
yep.
we were driving into town. We're like, what the hell is that? And they're like, oh, I think that's lacrosse.
Yeah.
Like, what's lacrosse? Like, nobody knew, right? Now, by the time I move here, which is, 20 something years later, all of a sudden lacrosse is everywhere, right? So it just really takes that initial impulse, right? It takes that initial building up of developing a strong adult and then mentorship community, right? Because that's ultimately what you have to do. You have to educate parents on what the programs are and what the teams are. What do you see happening with that water polo? Like staying at the Y, or do you think developing out of that?
That's a hard one because this past year we split teams. The varsity team went to the ICAC Center, which is the new pool out by the airport. JV and the girls stayed at the Y. That was a hard sort of transition between both because there's some JV kids that could practice with varsity, but then they had to make, am I going to go to varsity all the way out there? Do I stay here? That's the hardest part, is just the drive time, of getting people to whichever pool it is. And I don't know if the Y here is more centrally located, that I don't know. But if it grows, then I know our ultimate goal is to be able to split it in the middle. Say, okay, the people from, Star, Middleton, Nampa, Emmett, those areas, maybe come to the Y. Everything, from Meridian to a point, maybe Eagle or whatever, even into like Southeast Boise area, goes out to the ICAC Center.
You know what we need? This is what we need.
Another pool.
we need a private pool.
Yes.
We need somebody who's got a deep love for water polo and a deep pocket to move here and be like, I'm going to build a tank in my backyard. Yeah. I had this client, and he had a full, beautiful basketball court in his house with like scoreboards and everything. And all of these private teams would come and practice. He was loaded, like out of his mind. It was fantastic. Yeah, cool guy. But that's what we need. Sure. We need somebody to just give me a tank and just put it 8 feet, just nice and deep, and just let people come and train around.
The one thing I do notice here is the swimming program is actually fairly large, right? But I don't know if, because playing that they always wanted you to, you play water polo in the fall and you would swim in the spring. Right. And up here, it's a winter sport, right? It starts like the week after Thanksgiving and it goes to like Super Bowl weekend.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So that's what the season is up here. So, traveling to Coeur d'Alene in the wintertime, that's not fun,
Yeah, right.
That's a 6-hour drive, or you have to fly depending on what your funds are, right? So that type of stuff right there, if we got more people or we have it more solidified, because you go to any other state and for the most part it's going to be a fall or spring sport,
right? But
swimming here is just commandeers everything. And I don't know if the coaches are very willing to allow their swimmers to go play the sport, or they're just like, nope, swimming is going to be year round and that's all you're going to do. Right?
That's so unfortunate. So, I did swimming and water polo, wrestling, and then swimming. Okay. So I really enjoyed that middle. Yeah. I don't know if I'd say I really enjoyed it, but
I'm doing it now.
Yeah, right. But this is the problem. I think, first off, I was not smart enough to be as good a water polo player as I could have been in high school. I get more of the whatever now. Didn't come naturally to me. All right. But it was also the kind of thing in wrestling. I really struggled with the brutal competition aspect of wrestling. Yeah. And I was a super scrappy wrestler, and I'd go I was captain of the team. I'd go lay it down. But I just didn't have it like I do now with jiu-jitsu after being training like this for about 15 years. I totally get it. And this is we just show up and work. Yeah. This is just going to work. You're going to beat the hell out of somebody you don't know. They're going to beat the hell out of you. And you shake hands, you move on with your day. Right. But yeah, in high school, man, that winter season would come around, wrestling started to be oh no, this is going to be terrible. But I will say, I'm raising 3 boys, and one of them in particular, my 7-year-old, is a tank. He's in first grade. He's 120, 125 pounds already. He's a monster. And I'm not a big fan of football from my kid's standpoint. I like their brains the way they are. And man, wrestling thing seems to be the thing that like wrestling or water polo, because he really likes swimming too. Yeah.
They're good for both.
Dude, he'd be great.
Yeah, he'd be great for both.
Not if it's in the same season though, bro.
No, definitely not.
That's what I'm getting to.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Because I mean, your wrestling has the season, right? Because water polo is like the hybrid. Right now it's like, where can we just put a filler?
Right.
And
some dumb sport.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's just a filler. It's like, well, I think we need to bring it up to whatever we need to bring it up to, or change the seasons and be like, okay, no, this needs to be a sport just like every other, state has.
It should be a fall sport because there's nobody who's doing swimming and water polo that would even flirt with the idea of being on the football team.
No.
That's just a different person. Like that, the lineman is not jumping in the pool. No. Just put it in the fall. Yeah. You'll have no conflict from other sports and we move on with our lives.
And I think for some reason, swimming is actually a fall sport here. Which again, backwards.
Okay, well, they're trying to kill kids. Like, why not just put it in the spring like every other state?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, well, we're going to have to make some calls. We got to make some calls. Yeah, that's good.
That's right.
Yeah, so what's your wife do?
She works for a company called NVIDIA.
Like the the video?
Yeah. Yeah.
They work here?
No, she works remote, but that's who, she works for them.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does she think about the remote work? And I asked because I spoke with a friend of mine who has to go to like a WeWork meeting every week. He has to go meet his coworkers. He's like, listen, you've never worked in an office, which is true. I've never had a job. And he's like, you've never had to do this, but you have to understand the office is different now. I'm like, I can't relate. So like, how's the remote work going for her?
I think, when we moved here, she really liked it. She works on their events team, right? Yeah. So like she's been gone for the past 2 weeks, just got back this past week, because she goes out there and she helps run their entire global trade conference, right? And so they had their big GTC conference in San Jose, it was all last week, but she had to go out there a week before. So her running that, event, she likes to be hands-on. She likes to be around people.
Yeah, right.
And so over the past 3 years, where that's just pretty much gone away, this was the first in person since 2019. So everything before that was all virtual. So for her working from home, it's like now she's locked in, the office and she's on a computer and she's, taking phone calls. It's like, I missed the person, because I'm not around any people anymore. And so for her, like now, hey, we need to get you out amongst the crowds,
the people.
Yes.
You have to find your people.
Yes. Right. So it's, I think at first she liked it, just because it was easy. And when we were in the Bay Area,
she kept her job.
Yeah. She kept her job, and they didn't say anything. And because of what she can do, she can work from home. I just think because of this past year, it's ramped up so much, and now they're talking about going to Las Vegas for their conference. So now it might be a lot of trips back and forth to Las Vegas. But I mean, I think she likes it. I think she'd much rather be around people, be able to go into an office if that was the case.
Yeah.
But it afforded us the ability to come out here because again, I shut mine down and mine's starting from zero. Right. And so at least we were to come out here with her income, and what she was able to do and, build and she could work and we have bills and she could, handle that until, I'm building to the point where we can do whatever we want to go do.
Yeah. I did want to ask you, actually, I realized I forgot to ask about things to keep a spine healthy, but one question, and feel free to just plead the fifth on this. So your wife is gone for 2 weeks and you're in charge of your kid, the house, the whole thing. When she comes back, are you honest with her about how it went? Do you make it a little, are you the dude who's like, baby, it was so hard. I don't know how you do this. Like, no. Or you're like, oh, we had a blast. Oh, it was no problem. Yeah, no, it's okay that you didn't call. No, we were fine. We were out having too much fun.
No, it wasn't bad because the first week the kids were still in school, right? And then during spring break, they actually went back to their dad's house. He lives in Sacramento. And so, they flew back there, hung out with him for the week. So it was just me and the two dogs. And so I'm like, all right, I'm pedal down, I'm grinding, right? It's full on work mode, because I don't have to worry about whatever time I'm coming home. I'm like, let's go, And so last week was actually a super productive week, because I had no one to answer to, and then I'm like, did you guys make a mess? I'm like, I use the same dish in the same cup. I'm like, I just wash it and put it back. Wash it and put it back. I'm like, I'm not making a mess, So
that's awesome. Do you, and when you're at your office, if you're working late, do you just work out there?
Yes.
I have this fantasy of having like a big podcast studio eventually that has like a full gym, like the Rogan style, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's just a warehouse filled with awesome crap. And it's like, this is my spot. I don't know what to tell you. Dude, that's awesome. Yeah. You're kind of getting there. Yeah. You're like one step closer than I am. I got to get some barbells or like a medicine ball or something.
Sit here and do your,
oh my God. Oh my God. It'd be so awkward, but it would get the job done. Oh, yes. So what can people do? Cause a lot of back injuries that I know I heard about when I was in college. And then since then, people talk about repetitive movements that if only they knew to not like get out of a chair this way or not do the dishes this way or something, that those types of things wore on their back and ultimately led to like blown discs or just really unhealthy range of motion and lifestyles. So like, are there those things that you can like offer people? You're like, hey, stop doing this dumb thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the dumb thing is individualized, right? Because you could sit in a chair for 8 hours a day and I could sit in a chair for 8 hours a day and my back might hurt and yours may not. So wherein lies the culprit of why we have why I have an issue and you didn't, right? Or vice versa, right? So I think that's where, for me, I come down to behaviors. What do you do outside of the office? Are you strength training or are you not doing anything, right? So the fact that you have to sitting in one position, it's not going to be good for you, but it's also not the end all be all for you to have the worst back ever, right? And I just say, can you move, right? Can you kneel on the floor for a bit? Can you stand for a bit? Do you have a sit-stand desk? Can you just every 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just take a 2-minute break, right? Just go and walk and then, come on back, right? You're just changing behavior, right? No different than you going to the gym. If you go to the gym and lift the same weight and the same exercise every single time you go in, do you expect a different outcome, right? And at some time that repetitive strain is going to do what to the tissue, right? Your body has the ability to adapt and it's only going to adapt so far, right? And then pretty soon it just becomes wear and tear. Right. And if we're now just going to keep tearing it down, then again, your body at some point is going to pull the fire alarm, whether it's a true fire or it's a smoke, we don't know. Right. And that's sort of what I try and figure out is it a smoke, that's causing the fire alarm, or is it a true fire that's going on? And then how do we put it out? And then how do we change behavior? And there's where I think a lot of the issues come into. It's the behavior. We sit all day long for 8 hours and then we go home and then we sit in our car to drive home and then we go home and then we sit at our kitchen table and then we sit on our couch and we go lay down for 8 hours or whatever it is and we have crappy sleep. And we expect our body to do something different and then we feed it full of, bad stuff or we're not eating the best, So I think there's a lot of other factors that go into just not having good spine health or joint health for that matter.
Do you find a lot of sleep recovery coming from fixing people's backs? Because, sleep seems to be one of the things that's kind of been thrust into the forefront of people's kind of health programs, which is like, how is your sleep?
Right.
Most people sleep like trash.
Yes.
Right. And I can't remember who the physician's name was, but I heard him speaking on Rogan. He's like, listen, No, it was someone. It wasn't it wasn't James Nestor. It was a different person who was essentially studying sleep specifically, and it wasn't Huberman, but he was talking about. It's like we spend a third of our life sleeping.
Right.
We spend a third of our life. Nobody gives it any consideration. Like half the people just pass out from drinking too. It's like nobody's like we substitute a lot of different things for actual sleep, and it's one thing that people really need to start focusing on because it has all kinds of hormonal effects and horrible detrimental effects to other aspects of your health.
Right.
So, is that something that like if you help people get their mobility back or get better range of motion, does that have an effect on sleep or not really?
Oh, for sure it does. Yeah, if you think about if your body isn't ailing, right, when you're going to bed, you're going to sleep better, right? So if you have an injury, when do you typically notice it the most? At night.
Yeah,
right. Because why? It's you and you're there sleeping and your body's going, I need to go repair whatever tissue it is that you've damaged. So you get that big throbbing sensation, right? That just keeps pulsating. And it's like, oh my God, my knee hurts or my shoulder hurts or my blah, 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 whatever it is, right? So I think if you can make a more resilient body, right, then when you do go to sleep, right, the body doesn't have to sit there and repair that tissue anymore because why? It can now spend time repairing other stuff, that may not be, as much of a problem.
Yeah. Every time I've blown out my knee in jiu-jitsu, and I've done it like half a dozen times.
Yeah.
It's like, especially I have long legs and they get caught and then just, it's the worst. Right. But like I notice it all day long, but I'll be lying in bed just watching a TV show or something, and I'll turn to the left or turn to the right and just like, oh God, because my foot's trapped in the sheets. And I don't think about it because it's normally just boom. Yeah, it always, and then all night long. It's like I move while I'm asleep, and then this huge pain coming up. And it's like for those, it's always like the first week and a half. I sleep like trash. It's like I only sleep for 45 minutes at a time. I'm like, oh, son of a bitch.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not even letting your body even get to the point where you are in REM sleep, right? Because you're always stopping it short.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Yeah. So your body's never in that recovery mode.
Yeah.
It can, recover because you're always waking up, and then your body has to sort of downregulate again.
Yeah, no, I become like a crackhead. I can't get deep sleep at all. It's really not good. Anyway, listen, man, I really appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, for sure.
And more than anything, I really appreciate the effort you're putting in with water polo.
Yeah.
Like my kids really enjoy it. It's the kind of thing where my wife played water polo in college. She was super pumped about it. And we both really had expectations of our kids being in this sport, or at least engaging in this sport in some way. And I don't think anybody's starting a rowing program anytime soon. No. That's fine. That's a thankless, horrible sport. But, it's really cool to see that these nuggets, these little seeds that we're starting stuff, or excuse me, I'm participating in a weak way by having my kids show up. But, you guys are organizing things that help kids find this thing in a state that doesn't really experience it. Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. We're all transplants. Right. And being transplants, we always came here for the same reason, for the most part. And we want our kids to thrive, and you played and I've played. And, even though my kids aren't playing, but we want them to go thrive in something else, right? Whatever that might be. And so I think water polo is a fun one, and it even brought my competitive nature back out again. I'm like, oh, all right. If I'm going to come here and play, I want to go and start swimming again. The strength part for me is easy, right? It's like, all right, I need the endurance. I need my lung capacity to be able to go up and down that pool again. So I start sinking. I was thinking about when my wife came home and told me that they have a master's program, and she's like, it's from, whenever it was, right? I can't remember what time she said. Thursday nights, 7 to 8:45. I was like, first off, you absolutely should go, right? Like that's number one thing. But like, I wonder if we could get like a babysitter. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? You can't go after like another thing, especially like you haven't played. I mean, I have no problem swimming and playing polo and stuff. Get out and have fun. Oh my gosh, man. Just taking on another thing. But again, it's so fun. Yes. Like that's the thing. I loved polo, right? And because I did 3 sports, it was I was like an odd athlete because I did 3 sports pretty well. Yeah. But they were all different, right? Swimming and water polo, fine. But when you separate it with wrestling, you just destroy your whole musculature. Like you go from like long and relaxed to like this tiny explosive land person. And anyway, but I would have loved to play more water polo. But then when I went to college, it was like, oh, you're just going to sit in a boat and kill yourself for the next 4 years. It's the most thankless, horrible thing ever. Like, I tried it. And I was like, I had to get up at 4:00 in the morning. This was at Sacramento State, right? And so I had to go up to Lake Natomas, and I was up there, and I'm like, this isn't fun. It's freezing cold right now. It's and I got to be up here by 5 a.m. and be on the lake by 5 a.m. I'm like, this is not fun for me. No, screw this. And then everybody do not want to do this. I guarantee you, everybody there's like, no, keep it up. You're going to be great. And you're like, I hate life. Like you're sucking my will to live. It's the worst. Yeah. I had so every Wednesday morning we had this, we had a specific practice called the tour. This is my freshman year, so I'm 18 years old. Okay. They're like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go from the boathouse, which was on the Oakland estuary. So between Oakland and Alameda, we'll go from the boathouse to Jack London Square. We're going to turn at Jack London Square, row all the way to San Leandro, and then turn at San Leandro and row back to the boathouse. They're like, and we're going to clock it, and we'll have these times to like mark up against other times. It would take, when we started, it would be an hour and 20 minutes. And you had to, like, it had to be continuous. You couldn't deal with boat traffic. So we were leaving, like, it was horrific. It was, 5 a.m. Your hands are bloody. Like, the sun is coming up. You're just, it was the worst. And, of course, your coach is yelling at you the entire time, right? He's like, And, man, it was one of those things where I look back on it. It's like, I have no idea why I stuck with that sport, especially for 4 years. Like I should have I shouldn't say should, but like, I'm amazed I didn't just put my 1 year in and then walk away. Right. But yeah, it's a long haul. Water polo's not like that though. It's not, and for us up here, we're really trying to get these kids to understand the fundamentals. I played water polo, soccer, and baseball. Right. And so the one thing that I see with these kids out here is
a lot of them have a hard time throwing. So I'm telling Mark, hey, summer program right now, I'm going to take him out there. If we're at the Y, we're going to learn how to throw a baseball, right? That's the one thing. I mean, if you can get the mechanics of the throwing down, man, any of these kids will just they'll be awesome, in how they throw a water polo ball. It's just so much bigger, and it's easier, but a lot of them just don't have the throwing mechanics. They've never really thrown before,
Right.
I'll ask them, hey, have you ever watched like a baseball pitcher? Nah, not really.
That's on the hips, bro.
I'm like,
That's
yeah,
the
but
hips.
I'm talking about the arm, I just want the arm motion because a lot of these guys, they're like push shotting.
Yeah, right.
They're not even bringing an arm back to be able to throw.
Right, they have no sensitivity. It's like they catch a throw like this.
Yes, yeah, and everything's so stiff.
Just drops.
Yeah, it's like you try and catch a baseball that way. Tell me how it feels.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that'd be cool. Where are you going to do that?
Just outside the Y.
Oh,
they have all that grass that's in the back, the huge park that's back there. So we just go back there and just toss some baseballs. They have to learn how to catch nice and soft because you catch it stiff. I mean, it'll bruise your hand. So
if we got to find somebody, we got to find a patron of the arts.
Yeah, that's right.
A patron of the arts that just loves water polo and has like an extra 200 for a tank.
That's right.
And then like, well, we could even get that bubble. You ever seen the bubbles in the winter?
Yeah.
Right? Like we'll get a bubble. We can split the cost of the bubble. If we can find the 200,000 deep guy for the tank, we'll pay for the bubble.
That's right.
And we could just start a year-round club.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, God, that's what we should be doing. This is what we should be doing with our lives. We're wasting our time
it's our
here.
Business model. Let's do it.
Oh my God. That would be so fun. Anyway, listen, I appreciate you, sir.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
So I've got an office called Premier Spine and Sport, Eagle, and in Meridian. So I'm inside D1 training in Meridian. I have my own standalone here in Eagle. You can just look it up on my website, if you want. Instagram, my Dr. Justin Brink or Premier Spine and Sport, on both of those. So either one.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah,
that sounds incredible. That's how I found you.
Yeah.
You put up a post about it was like January. January 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm like, my guy.
Yeah.
Gotta reach out. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. Anyway, thanks, sir. Awesome. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.